friends, welcome to Waking Disciples. My name is Cris Rogers and I am your host. I hope that you are doing well. Here we go, back in with a new term, new episodes coming out over the coming weeks. Got some interviews with some fantastic people coming up as well. Now, today's episode, I want to just give a bit of a reflection on an experience that I had from Good Friday. And I got the opportunity to play a role in the Passion Play that happens in Trafalgar Square. It's been going on, this Passion Play, for about 15 years, something like that. And every Easter, they have taken over Leicester Square, thousands and thousands, Trafalgar Square, taken over Trafalgar Square, and thousands of people turn up to see the Passion Play, the life of Christ played out, acted out before you in Trafalgar Square. Just an incredible experience, which I'll say a little bit more about in a second. But I got to play a part in it this year, and from that I want to give some thoughts and observations and reflections just from myself, from my experience of being a part of that particular play. So we'll jump in a second and we will just talk about it, and I'll talk about what I played, what I did, and what that meant for me. But welcome, if this is your first or an early episode that you're listening to of Making Disciples 1-1, welcome to you. It's nice to have you with me. I love it when people engage with me as well. So I am on social media as Rabbi Rogers. I am on Twitter, I am on Instagram, I am also on Facebook under my own name, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on any episode. Plus, if you have got topics you'd like us to look at, I'd be very, very up for hearing from you and looking at some point in the future, maybe covering the topics that you would like us to be covering in this podcast. But friends, let's jump in and have a conversation about the Passion Play in Trafalgar Square and my experiences from it. Well, here we go. Let's have a conversation about the Passion Play in Trafalgar Square. Friends, I'm going to put a link to the YouTube recording of the Passion Play. If you've never seen it before, I know many of the listeners to the podcast are global, and therefore you wouldn't be able to go into Trafalgar Square and see it. So let me just give you a picture of it. Trafalgar Square in the heart of London gets taken over by Christians for two performances of the last week of Christ in his crucifixion and resurrection. And it starts with everybody's kind of sat around the edge of Trafalgar Square, and it starts really with Jesus riding in on a donkey, and it really kicking off that last week of Jesus. And he's wonderful. He pulls the crowd, gets the crowd involved, and it's acted out just phenomenally by these amazing actors that come from. It's a performance that happens in the summer as well at a place called Wintershall. And Wintershall, Wintershall. If you want to check out their website, it's wintershall.org.uk, and you can go and be a part of this. And what they do is they perform the life of Christ. I think it's somewhere around the latter end of June. Yeah, it's 17th to 21st of June. They'll be doing it this year in 2025, but they do it every year at Wintershall. It's a big estate, and they take this performance and they take the Easter part and they perform it in Trafalgar Square every year. And it is beautifully done, beautifully acted, really, really moving. And I struggle to get to it because of Spring Harvest. It's always clashed with Spring Harvest. And 2 years ago, it didn't clash with Spring Harvest, and now I was able to go. It's put on by friends of mine, people that I know, and I was able to go and sit and watch it, and was just utterly blown away by the performances and how moving this depiction of Christ's trial, crucifixion, but then the resurrection. And it's just beautiful. And they said to me last year, Chris, if you ever want to be a part of it, let us know. We'd be interested if you wanted to play a part. And I actually said, well, I would like to play a part. And they asked me which character. I said which character for me was the one that's particularly moving. And they approached me in the year and said, would you be up for it? Would you be up for it? So I actually, run this event, Spring Harvest, over Easter. and it was ending on Good Friday. So I smuggled myself away very, very early from the event to get to Trafalgar Square for this Passion Play, to play my part in it. Now, what was the part that I played? The part that I played was Simon of Cyrene. Simon of Cyrene. Now, Simon of Cyrene is a character. You say character makes it sound like a story, doesn't it? He's a person who was pulled in to carry Jesus's cross from the crowd. He was grabbed from the crowd, he was pulled in, and he was forced to carry Jesus's cross for him when Christ couldn't carry it for himself. One of the things that is known about the crucifixion is that when they made you carry the cross, they do an epically long route, because they really want to make a spectacle of you. And it was too long, and we know in the story that Jesus collapsed and fell to the side of the road. And so I'm going to read to you. This is Matthew, Mark, and Luke. This is the part of the story, the telling of the story where this happened. So Matthew 27:32 says this: "And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name, a Syrian, who was passing by, coming out of the country, and they compelled him to carry Jesus's cross." Mark 15:21, "And they compelled a passerby coming from the country, Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry Jesus' cross." Luke 23:26, "And when they led him away, they seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, as he was coming in from the country, and placed on him the cross to carry behind Jesus." So it's told in the three of the Gospels that here's a man called Simon from a place called Cyrene, and he carries Jesus' cross when Christ was unable. So he's grabbed from the crowd and made to carry the cross for Christ. Now, where is he from? This Cyrene, tradition says a place called Tripoli, but it's believed he was from modern-day Libya, and Cyrene is from Libya. And so here we have a man who was a foreigner, who was forced to carry Jesus' cross for him. And that was the part that I wanted to play. That was the part I wanted to play. And now why? I could play it. Somebody said to me, "Oh, I thought you'd have played a Roman, Chris. You like the dressing up." And it was very true. But there was a reason I chose Simon. Partly because he's just grabbed from the crowd, which means you are just wearing your own clothes, and you're grabbed in such a way that you are quite brutally pulled from the crowd and forced to carry this cross in front of everyone. And I think I was quite challenged by Simon when I first saw it, the unexpectedness of having to carry Jesus' cross for him. And I think Jesus carried his cross for us, and in this moment somebody is pulled in to be a part of this story. And you could reflect on it as he's forced to carry the cross, so there's a joining of humanity with what Christ is doing there. There's also this sense that humanity crucified Christ. It wasn't just Pilate, it wasn't just the governor, it wasn't just those who chanted to crucify him, but actually we help Jesus towards the cross in the fact that we're sinners. There's all of that kind of stuff going on. But it just really compelled me that this man was pulled from the crowd and forced to carry this cross, and I thought that's the part I want to play. There's something really intimate here of carrying the cross of Christ with Christ, walking with him, and that really, really struck me. So I thought that's the character that I wanted to play. So Good Friday, there I am, Leicester Square, at Trafalgar Square. I keep calling it Leicester Square, I'm so sorry. That's where the Lego shop is, at Trafalgar Square, and I was in my own clothes. I had a shopping bag with tins and fruit in that I was given, and I was sat in the crowd with some friends and family, and as Jesus is carrying the cross, he came past where I was, and just beyond me in Trafalgar Square, Jesus collapses to the ground, and the Roman at the front shouts, "Get somebody to carry the cross." And this Roman centurion comes up and just grabs the scruff of my jacket from the crowd and pulls me out of the crowd. Now, to everybody around me, they obviously didn't know this was happening, so they were as shocked as I was playing it, and they were shocked because they just thought I was a guy in the crowd, and I'd been sat there, since right at the beginning when they arrived. So I chatted to some of them, so they just knew me as the guy that was in the crowd. So I get literally yanked out, and as I get yanked out, I fall on the floor. I haven't quite got my feet sorted yet, and I actually fall on my knees on the floor, and my shopping went everywhere. And he grabbed me by my jacket and he just dragged me along and kind of stumbled along. And so I'm shouting, "I'm only visiting Jerusalem. I'm only visiting Jerusalem." And he says, the guy acting, the centurion said, "I don't care where you're visiting from. I don't care where you're visiting from." And I was thrown on the floor and told to pick up the cross of Christ, and then carried this cross with Jesus through Trafalgar Square to where he was to be crucified. And then I fell on the floor with the cross. It was actually heavier than I thought it was going to be honest. Fell on the floor myself, and I was told to get out, and then Jesus was crucified. I then went off and went back to my seat. So I got to play this part, an amazing part, in front of all these people, thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And it's just really struck me, how would I have responded to this unexpected challenge of events? You're there, you're in Jerusalem, you're making your way through, you've been in the fields, and you get called out the crowd to carry this criminal's cross. How would you respond? How would Simon respond? I'm sure there's a level of anger. How have I got pulled into this? Why are you getting me involved? For me, there was some level of excitement knowing that it was coming. I don't think that would have been Simon's experience when he carried the cross of Jesus. I'm sure that he would have been filled full of anxiety, anger, confusion, not knowing where this was heading. I'm sure all of those things were going on. For me, there was some level of excitement, but also just the unknown of how was this gonna go. They'd not really talked me through a great deal on how he was going to get me out of the crowd, so it was all quite shocking for me as well, in the sense that I was literally just dragged out of the crowd. What's really funny is I actually had somebody from Transport for London come up to me after the second performance and just said, "Oh, I'm really pleased to find out that you know these guys and that they asked you beforehand," because I was thinking to myself, gosh, we're going to have a court case on our hands. This guy's going to sue for being dragged in. Which interesting, isn't it? How different people respond. But what a privilege to play a part in this play. What a joy to play a part in that passion play, and for me to play that character of Simon of Cyrene. And I've just been reflecting on it over the last few weeks, just trying to think it through a little bit. What did I feel in that moment? What did I experience in that moment? And I think there's a few things that are on my mind that I've been jotting down that I'll just kind of talk through my own reflections on playing that part of Simon. The first thing that I've been reflecting on is the call for the unexpected. Simon had no idea that this was going to happen. He had no plan on carrying Jesus' cross that day. He was simply a passerby, and this Roman centurion, compelled him, pulled him out, and forced him to play his part in carrying this cross for Jesus. And I do think sometimes the most meaningful spiritual moments come when we're not seeking them, when we're not expecting them. What a profound and amazing moment to have been the man that was pulled out the crowd and forced to carry the cross of Jesus. Totally unexpected. Yet what he did in carrying the cross for Christ, what a privilege to play your part in supporting Christ in what is the glorious redemption plan that was in place. What a privilege it would have been for Simon. I'm sure not in the moment, but as years went by, I was able to help Jesus in that moment. When Jesus was helping us, Simon was able to help Jesus in helping carry that cross. And there's something really profound in that. This unexpected role, and there are moments that are very unexpected in our lives that actually turn out to be really profound moments where we get to be, the hands and feet of Jesus in some shape or form. So interruptions, are we welcome for the interruption? Because the interruptions are sometimes the most profound moments. The other area that I've just been reflecting on is sharing in Jesus' suffering. Simon is pulled out the crowd, and he's physically forced to carry and sharing in Jesus's burden, the burden of the cross. And I really do think about how this mirrors how we're called to bear one another's burdens in community, carrying each other's burdens, and that feeling of taking on and shouldering others' suffering, even though it's not ours. Something like sharing in the suffering really struck me. And this really links, I think, to Jesus. It says in Mark 8:34, doesn't it? Pick up your cross and follow me. If you want to be my disciple, pick up your cross and follow me. And in the Gospel of Luke, which is the only Gospel that says that Simon carried the cross behind Christ. All the others talk about him carrying the cross with Christ. But Luke talks about Simon of Cyrene carrying the cross behind Christ. All the other Gospels mention that he was just carrying it with him. And I do wonder how much Luke is wanting us to remember that, if anybody would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. In other words, is Luke suggesting this is actually a picture of discipleship? If you want to be a disciple, pick up your cross and follow me. Simon of Cyrene following Jesus Christ, carrying the cross for Christ. What an amazing symbol. And for me, Mark 8 is that, if you want to be my disciple, pick up your cross and follow me. That is the image of discipleship, moving from being a fan to a follower. A fan stands at the edge and is a spectator. And an observer, a fan, or then you have a follower, somebody who's no longer spectating, but they're coming out of the crowd and they're joining in, walking with Christ, following Christ, carrying their cross with Christ. That's the significant thing about being a disciple, isn't it? The following of Christ and carrying our cross with Christ. So there's something here about sharing in Jesus' suffering, but also the call to discipleship. Pick up your cross and follow me. And moving from being a spectator to being a partaker, one who joins in. And, my question for us is, how often are we just simply spectators of Christ's life? We're spectators in his death, resurrection. We just watch it. It's played out in front of us. And then the call to not be a spectator but come out the crowd, to leave the crowd behind and to become somebody who carries their cross with Jesus, like Simon of Cyrene. And it's really struck me how Simon is a clear picture of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, to go where Jesus is going, to carry what Jesus is carrying. That's what's really struck me. The other things that have really struck me is around just the proximity towards God's pain, the divine pain. Simon was brought into this intimate proximity with Jesus and his pain, and it was the most vulnerable moment, wasn't it? And I'm sure Simon's panicking that he's going to be forced to be crucified in Jesus' place. I'm sure he's panicking at the moment. It's a really vulnerable moment. And there's very few people that actually got so close to Jesus during the Passion Play, so close that they actually carried the cross. Now, one of the things that I noticed, so I carried the cross twice at the two different performances. And on the way home, my son said to me, "Hey, Dad, you've got blood on your shoulder." And he was right. The jacket that I was wearing had red staining on it, where the blood from Jesus had been on the cross that he was carrying, and then where his shoulder with the blood touched then my shoulder, the blood transferred over. So I'm now covered in the blood of Jesus. I'm covering. There was something really profound about the proximity towards God's this divine pain that he was going through. And Simon is so close to the divine suffering, and I'm sure it changed his perspective on Jesus and his humility and his humanity. So Simon carrying the cross with Jesus, so close to this divine pain, Then the other thing that I've just been pondering on and thinking about is just the anonymousness of this servant. We don't know much about Simon at all. We are told that he's the father of Alexander and Rufus. We're told that he's from Cyrene, but we actually know nothing else about this guy. He comes in and he's gone. As fast as he's come into the story, he's left the story. This anonymous servant. And although it's recorded in 3 of the Gospels, we know very, very little about this man. And what really strikes me in this is the importance of our contributions. People, you may not be known, and you may only do what you do for a short period of time, but actually, as we do these things, we serve Jesus, and as we serve Jesus, we are glorifying him. And these things may be small, maybe not a big thing that someone carried Jesus' cross for a quarter of an hour, whatever it was, but actually he gets caught up in what God is doing, and his name is mentioned. So there's something there about being anonymous servants that are recognised by God in a really profound way. And then the final thing that I've been reflecting on is what I'm calling the transformed by the encounter. And it was really fast. I mean, for me, it was really fast, really, really fast. And carrying that cross, it was very hard to pause time and just soak in it. But there's clearly for me a transforming. I will never preach on that moment in the Gospels again the same because of my experience. By being pulled out the crowd, dragged, falling to my knees, being forced to carry this cross, carrying it, falling, and then being sent away, really profoundly just challenged me, spoke to me, made me think, pause, and therefore I am transformed by this encounter. And I'm sure Simon was transformed as well. And Christian tradition suggests that Simon was deeply affected by this encounter. And some say that he and his sons became followers of Jesus after this point. Now, I wouldn't have a reason to disagree with that, because we're given their names and the names of their sons, which would tell me they were known. Peter, that dictates the gospel to Mark, and Mark writes it down, wrote the gospel of Mark. It was Peter's gospel. The fact that Peter names Alexander and Rufus would tell me that Peter had met them afterwards and that they had come to faith, so that this encounter transformed them as they came to faith. I have no reason not to believe that. And it must have been this brief moment, but it would have been deeply meaningful. And it's meaningful to the narrative, but it's also meaningful to them and their faith, as it was just meaningful to me, the honour of carrying the cross with Jesus, playing my part in supporting Jesus in carrying that cross, but also the transformative power of that moment changing me, and very much I believe would have changed Simon of Cyrene. So there's just a few observations and thoughts there about playing my part in carrying this cross with Jesus in this passion play. Just a few observations on how it felt for me, and I certainly won't forget it, and it will affect my preaching. It will affect how I see that moment in time. The fear just in being pulled out, not quite knowing how things were going to be panned out. Now, I did know it was going to happen. We'd agreed it was going to happen. But even then, I didn't really know how it was going to happen. I didn't know how it would feel. And that's what I've really been reflecting on, is just how did that feel for me emotionally to be involved in this way. So I'm going to leave it there for now. But Trafalgar Square, the Passion Play, performed by the Wintershall guys. Do check out their website, wintershall.org.uk. I'll put a link to the performance of the Passion Play in the show notes, so you can see the whole thing if you've never seen it. But really, really special. But being called to carry Christ's cross in that way just really struck me and moved me as a follower of Jesus. And I think the bit that I'm going to take away with me and just keep chewing on more is this sharing in the suffering. Pick up your cross and follow me. And just, I don't think it's incidental that Luke talks about, if anybody would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. And in the Luke passage, he clearly says that Simon carried the cross behind Jesus. He followed behind Jesus, carrying the cross. And I want to just dwell on that a little more, and I think that will change how I preach on Mark 8, 34 in the future. What, a clear picture there of that passage being walked out. So friends, until next time, grace and peace, and I hope that you're doing well, and I look forward to the episodes that are going to be going out over the coming weeks. Have you ever been a part of a passion play? I'd love to hear what was your experience. What character did you play, and how did that character strike you, change you, challenge you as you carried that character through the story of the passion play. I'd love to hear how was your experience. Friends, until next time, grace and peace. I'll speak to you soon.